The man standing on our front porch had been dead 18 months ago. I knew that because his heart was beating inside my wife's chest. He arrived at 11:47 on a stormy Thursday night. He was soaked from the rain. His dark coat was torn near one shoulder, and there was a fading bruise beneath his left eye. My wife, Rachel, stood behind me in the hallway. One hand rested over the scar beneath her collarbone. The stranger looked past me and directly at her. Then he said something I would spend the rest of my life trying to forget. "My name is Aaron Vale. According to St. Catherine's Hospital, I died 18 months ago." He raised a plastic folder. Inside it was a certified death certificate. There was a photograph clipped to the corner. It showed the same face as the man standing outside our house, the same dark hair, the same hazel eyes, the same narrow scar along his jaw. Under the photograph were the words, Aaron Michael Vale. Date of death, October 14. Cause of death, traumatic brain injury. Organ donor status, approved. Rachel stepped closer. Her breathing changed. I recognized that sound immediately. For 9 years, I had learned every warning sign her body could give us. "Ethan," she whispered. "That's his name." I turned toward her. "What?" "The donor." The stranger closed his eyes, as if hearing those words physically hurt him. Rachel's transplant had been confidential. We had never met the donor's family. We had never been given his photograph. But 6 months after the surgery, Rachel had received a carefully screened letter from someone claiming to be the donor's younger sister. The letter said the donor's name was Aaron. He had been 34 years old. He had died after a nighttime car accident. The stranger standing in the rain was 36 now. The math was perfect. The face on the death certificate was his, and the heart that had saved my wife was supposed to have been removed from his body. I should have shut the door. I should have called the police before allowing him to say another word. Instead, I asked him the question that made everything worse. "If you're Aaron Vale, whose heart does my wife have?" His eyes moved back to Rachel. "My brother's." Thunder rolled somewhere beyond the trees. For several seconds, none of us moved. Then headlights swept across our front windows. Aaron looked over his shoulder with sudden fear. "Please," he said, "you need to let me inside before they find me." I locked the door behind him. "My name is Ethan Cole. I was 38 years old, and until that night, I believed the worst thing that could happen to a family had already happened to ours." Rachel and I had been married 11 years. She was 35, with auburn brown hair and green eyes that could make even a hospital room feel warmer. Before she became sick, she taught music at an elementary school. She played piano at community events, remembered every child's birthday, and could identify almost any song after hearing 3 notes. Then, 3 years earlier, she collapsed in the school auditorium. The diagnosis was dilated cardiomyopathy. Her heart had become enlarged and dangerously weak. Medication helped for a while. Then it stopped helping. A mechanical pump kept her alive during the final weeks, but her doctors were honest with me. Without a transplant, Rachel was going to die. We waited 107 days. On the night of October 14th, Dr. Evelyn Monroe entered Rachel's hospital room and told us a compatible heart had become available. I remembered crying before she finished speaking. I remembered Rachel gripping my hand. I remembered feeling grateful and ashamed at the same time, because our miracle could only happen after another family's tragedy. The surgery lasted nearly 7 hours. At 4:12 the following morning, Dr. Monroe came into the waiting room and told me the new heart was beating strongly. Rachel survived. Her recovery was difficult, but she fought for every ordinary moment. Walking to the mailbox, making breakfast, playing half a song on the piano before becoming tired. By the first anniversary of her transplant, she could walk 2 miles without stopping. We believed we had been given our life back. Then Aaron Vale knocked on our door. He stood in our kitchen while rainwater dripped from his coat on the floor. Rachel sat at the table, pale and silent. I stayed between them. "Start from the beginning," I said. Aaron looked toward the windows before answering. "I had an identical twin brother named Julian.
He removed an old photograph from the plastic folder. Two young men stood beside a lake. They appeared to be about 25. At first glance, they were indistinguishable, but one smiled directly at the camera while the other looked slightly away. Aaron pointed to the smiling brother. "That's me." Then he touched the second man. That was Julian. Rachel stared at the photograph. "The hospital said you didn't have a brother." They lied. Why? Because Julian was supposed to disappear. I was supposed to die. I almost laughed, not because anything was funny, because his explanation sounded impossible, and sometimes disbelief comes out like laughter when fear has nowhere else to go. Aaron placed another document on the table. It was a hospital discharge summary. The patient's name was Julian Vale. The date of birth was the same as Aaron's. The report described a man who had spent 11 months unconscious after a vehicle collision. He had suffered a serious head injury, several fractures, and extensive memory loss. Aaron tapped the patient photograph. Again, it was his face. I woke up in a long-term neurological facility outside Millbrook. Everyone called me Julian. "Maybe you are Julian," I said. "I thought that too." He looked down at his hands. "For the first few weeks, I couldn't remember my own address. I couldn't remember the accident. I barely remembered my mother's face." He explained that the care facility possessed only limited medical history. According to its records, Julian Vale had no close relatives willing to assume responsibility for him. His treatment bills were being paid through a private trust. When his memory began returning, he told the staff his name was Aaron. They treated the claim as confusion caused by his brain injury. Then one of the nurses searched for Aaron Vale online. She found his obituary. It included a photograph of the man sitting in our kitchen. The obituary said Aaron Vale had died at St. Catherine's Hospital. It also said his organs had saved 4 lives. Rachel's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "Why didn't you go to the police?" "I did." "What happened?" "They took my fingerprints." "And?" Aaron hesitated. The fingerprints matched Aaron Vale's driver's license record. That should have settled everything. Instead, the detective discovered that Aaron Vale had been legally cremated 18 months ago. His wife had identified the body. His mother had signed the funeral documents. A transplant team had documented the recovery of his heart, liver, kidneys, and corneas. The police assumed the man claiming to be Aaron Vale was an identity thief who had somehow altered an old fingerprint record. 2 days later, the private trust paying for his care disappeared. The facility demanded that he leave. Then someone broke into his motel room where he was staying and stole his medical records. Only the copies inside his plastic folder survived, because he had carried them with him. "What does any of this have to do with Rachel?" I asked. Aaron looked at her. "Julian was your donor." "You can't know that." "Yes, I can." He removed one final photograph. It showed Julian sitting in a hospital cafeteria beside a woman in blue surgical scrubs. The woman was smiling nervously at the camera. Rachel recognized her first. "That's Lydia Shaw." Lydia was St. Catherine's transplant coordinator. She had guided us through Rachel's waiting list evaluations. She had called when the donor heart became available. She had delivered the anonymous letter from the donor's supposed sister.
Aaron turned the photograph over. A handwritten date appeared on the back. 3 weeks before the accident. Julian had been investigating St. Catherine's, Aaron said. He believed someone inside the hospital was falsifying patient identities and moving wealthy patients ahead of others on the transplant list. Rachel shook her head. "Why would your brother investigate a hospital?" "He was a journalist." Aaron said Julian had spent almost a year gathering information about suspicious donations, private payments, and medical records that changed after patients died. He believed Lydia Shaw was helping him. 3 weeks after that photograph was taken, the brothers' car went off a rural bridge during a storm. Aaron remembered Julian driving. He remembered headlights approaching from behind. Then he remembered their car being struck. Everything after that was darkness. One brother was declared brain dead at St. Catherine's. The other was transferred to a private facility under the wrong name. The hospital claimed the dead man was Aaron.
Aaron believed the dead man had actually been Julian. Identical twins can have nearly identical medical characteristics, same blood type, similar tissue markers. If we arrived without identification, the mistake might have started accidentally. But it didn't stay accidental, Rachel said. No, Aaron's wife, Celeste, had identified the dead man as Aaron. She collected a $3 million life insurance payment. Julian's identity remained attached to the surviving brother in long-term care. According to Aaron, someone had later removed Julian from every publicly searchable record connected to the crash. I looked at the man across from us. What do you want? The original donor file. We don't have it. Recipients receive discharge summaries, medication records, and compatibility data. None of those documents name the donor. Normally, they don't. Aaron reached toward Rachel's folder, then stopped before touching it. But Julian believed someone at St. Catherine's had created hidden identification numbers inside the compatibility reports. He told me about them a week before the crash. Rachel and I looked at each other. She kept every record from her transplant. Boxes of them filled the cabinet in my office. If your report contains Julian's identification number, Aaron continued, it proves the hospital knew which brother died. And if it contains yours? Rachel asked. Aaron's expression became empty. Then I don't know who I am. A sound came from the front of the house. 3 deliberate knocks. Aaron arose so quickly that his chair struck the wall. The person outside knocked again. Then my phone rang. The screen displayed St. Catherine's Hospital. I answered on speaker. "Mr. Cole?" a woman said. I recognized Lydia Shaw's voice. She sounded out of breath. "Lydia? Is Rachel with you?" "Yes. You need to listen carefully. A man may come to your house claiming to be Aaron Vale." No one in the kitchen moved. Lydia continued, "Do not give him access to Rachel's medical records. Do not tell him anything about the transplant. Lock your doors and call the police." Aaron stared at the phone. "Ask her how she knew I was here," he whispered. Lydia heard him. Her breathing stopped. Then she said, "Ethan, that man is not Aaron." Aaron stepped closer to the phone. "You took my brother's photograph 3 weeks before the crash." The line went silent. I thought the call had disconnected. Then Lydia spoke again, much more quietly. "Julian died 18 months ago." Aaron's face tightened. "I know." "No," Lydia said, "you don't understand." The knocking at the front door became louder. A man's voice called from outside. "Police, open the door." Lydia's next words came quickly. "The man inside your house is the reason Julian is dead." The call ended. Rachel looked at Aaron. I could see fear replacing sympathy in her expression. Sirens approached in the distance. I moved toward the drawer where we kept the kitchen knives. Aaron noticed. He raised both hands. "I didn't kill my brother." "Then why is the hospital warning us about you?" "Because Lydia is trying to keep you from finding the donor file." A heavy impact shook the front door. "Mr. Cole," the voice outside called, "step away from the suspect." Aaron looked toward the back entrance. I blocked his path. "You're not leaving until the police hear everything. If they take me back, I'll disappear again." He pulled a small key from beneath his shirt. It hung from a black cord around his neck. Stamped in the metal were 3 numbers, 417. Rachel suddenly stood. Her chair scraped across the floor. I asked what was wrong. She hurried toward my office and returned carrying the binder that contained her transplant records. Her hands trembled as she opened the compatibility report. Near the bottom of the 3rd page was a sequence we had never noticed. SCV 417. Aaron stared at it. "That's Julian's evidence locker." Another impact struck the front door. The lock began to split away from the frame. Aaron grabbed the photograph of the twins but left everything else on the table. "Locker 417 is beneath the old maternity wing at St. Catherine's," Aaron said. Julian told me if anything happened to him, the truth would be there. The front door burst open. 2 uniformed officers entered with Lydia Shaw behind them. She pointed directly at Aaron. That's him. The officers ordered everyone to remain still. Aaron did not run. He slowly put his hands on top of his head. One officer moved forward to restrain him. Then Rachel whispered Lydia's name. The transplant coordinator looked at her. Rachel held up the compatibility report. If he's lying, why is the number from his key printed inside my medical file? Lydia's face lost all color. For one brief second, she looked toward the back door. The officer beside her noticed. So did I. Then Lydia reached inside her coat. The police shouted at her to show her hands. She pulled out a folded document and dropped it on the floor. It was another death certificate. The photograph belonged to Julian Vale, but the name printed beneath it was Aaron's. Lydia looked at Rachel. That heart was never supposed to go to you. Then every light in our house went out.
The lights went out before any of us could react. Rachel screamed. Something struck the kitchen table, and the plastic folder containing Aaron's documents fell to the floor. One of the officers shouted for everyone to remain still. A flashlight snapped on. Its beams swept across the kitchen and found Aaron exactly where he had been standing, his hands still raised above his head. Then the light moved toward Lydia Shaw. She was gone. The officer who had been standing beside her turned toward the hallway. Side door. He ran from the kitchen. The second officer ordered Aaron onto the floor. Another flashlight appeared near the front entrance. For a few seconds, our house became a confusion of shadows, police radios, and footsteps. I reached for Rachel. She was still standing beside the table, one hand pressed against her chest. "Are you all right?" My heart is racing. That sentence terrified me more than the darkness. I guided her into a chair and checked the pulse at her wrist. It was fast but steady. The battery-powered emergency light above our stove flickered on, casting a weak red glow across the room. Aaron was on his knees, with an officer securing his wrists. He looked at Rachel. "Her medication is in the cabinet beside the refrigerator." I stared at him. "How do you know that?" "It's where transplant patients usually keep the medicine they need quickly." The officer pulled him to his feet. "Stop talking. I'm trying to help her. You can help by remaining silent." The officer led Aaron toward the front hallway. Before disappearing from view, Aaron looked back at me. "Locker 417, he said. "Don't let the hospital reach it first." A police car took him away less than 5 minutes later. Lydia's vehicle remained parked across the street, but officers found no sign of her. The power company eventually confirmed that someone had opened the service box behind our house and manually disconnected the electricity. It had not been caused by the storm. Someone had been waiting outside. Someone knew Aaron was coming. At 12:36 in the morning, an ambulance took Rachel to St. Catherine's Hospital. I rode beside her. The paramedic monitored her heart rhythm and assured us that it appeared stable. Her transplant was functioning normally. Her rapid heartbeat was most likely caused by fear, but neither of us felt relieved when the ambulance doors opened and we saw the hospital's glass entrance. St. Catherine's had once represented hope. That night, it looked like the center of everything threatening us. Dr. Evelyn Monroe met us in the emergency department. She was 58, with carefully styled gray hair and the calm, controlled voice that had guided us through the worst hours of our lives. She examined Rachel personally. "You've experienced an extreme amount of stress. Your heart rhythm has returned to normal, but I'd like to keep you overnight." Rachel watched her closely. "Did Lydia Shaw call you?" Dr. Monroe paused for only a moment. "No. She came to our house." "That's impossible. Lydia has been on administrative leave for nearly 2 weeks. I stepped closer. "Why?" "Patient confidentiality violations." "What kind of violations?" "I'm not permitted to discuss an employee's disciplinary record." Rachel reached into her bag and removed the compatibility report. She opened it to the page containing the number SCV-147. "Do you know what this means?"
Dr. Monroe's expression did not change. It appears to be an internal reference code. Reference to what? I would need to examine the archived records. You performed my transplant. I've performed hundreds. But you remember my donor. The doctor looked at Rachel for several seconds. Then she smiled gently. I remember that you received a healthy organ at the moment you needed it. That is what matters now. Rachel did not return the smile. Was my donor Aaron Vale or Julian Vale? The doctor's calm expression finally slipped. Only slightly, but I saw it. She closed the report and handed it back. Ethan, your wife needs rest. Encouraging this kind of speculation could be dangerous for her recovery. Her words sounded compassionate. Her eyes did not. 2 nurses moved Rachel into an observation room. Dr. Monroe tried to take the transplant binder with her, claiming she needed to compare it with the hospital's records. I refused. For the first time since Rachel's surgery, I saw anger in the doctor's face. She covered it quickly. Keep it with you then, she said, but do not remove any original hospital property. The binder belongs to us. Some documents may have been included accidentally. She left before I could ask what she meant. Rachel waited until the door closed. She knows. I think so. No, I mean she knows exactly which brother died. A detective arrived shortly after 2 in the morning. Her name was Mara Quinn. She was in her late 40s, with dark hair streaked with gray, and the exhausted expression of someone who had been called away from sleep too many times. She placed Lydia's second death certificate on the table. The photograph showed Julian. The name beneath it said Aaron. Detective Quinn had already examined the document. The certificate number was legitimate. The state registry confirmed that it had been created 6 days after the transplant. But the first certificate, the one Aaron had brought, was also legitimate. There were 2 officially registered copies of the same death. Each used a different photograph. Each identified the dead man as Aaron Vale. That isn't supposed to be possible, said Quinn. Neither is a dead organ donor knocking on my door. The detective did not smile. She opened another folder. The fingerprints taken from Aaron after his arrest matched Aaron Vale's driver's license record in 14 separate points. They also matched a partial print collected from the twins' childhood home 20 years ago. Is he Aaron? Asked Rachel. The evidence suggests he is. Then why is he under arrest? Because someone filed a sworn statement claiming he caused the crash that killed Julian. Who? Aaron's wife, Celeste Vale. According to the statement, Aaron had learned that Julian was investigating him for financial fraud. The brothers argued on the night of the collision. Celeste claimed Aaron threatened to stop Julian from exposing him. After the crash, she identified the dead brother as Aaron because she believed Aaron had been driving. But that makes no sense. If Aaron had survived, why would his own wife identify his brother's body as his? The detective agreed that it was suspicious. Celeste had received the life insurance payment 6 weeks after the funeral. 3 months later, she sold her home and disappeared. Her current address was unknown. What about Lydia? I asked. We found blood on the latch of your side gate. Rachel became pale. Was she hurt? It could have been from a minor cut. We don't know. What we do know is that she left her phone and car behind. Quinn leaned toward us. Before she disappeared, Lydia told the responding officers that Aaron was dangerous. Did she explain why? No. Did Aaron threaten either of you? No. Did he ask for money? No. He wanted Rachel's transplant file. The detective studied the binder. Then we need to understand why. She asked us not to contact Aaron's relatives or visit St. Catherine's archived maternity wing. She specifically warned us not to search for locker 417.
The area had been closed for years and was considered unsafe. I promised we would wait. It was a promise I broke before sunrise. Rachel slept for less than an hour. At 5:10, a nurse drew blood for routine testing. At 5:25, I watched another employee enter the room and remove the sample from the collection tray. He was not wearing a hospital identification badge. When I challenged him, he claimed the laboratory had requested an urgent repeat analysis. I pressed the call button. The man left immediately. The charge nurse later confirmed that no repeat test had been ordered. Security searched the floor but could not find him. That was when Rachel decided we were leaving. Dr. Monroe objected. She warned us that leaving against medical advice could place Rachel's health at risk. Rachel signed the discharge form anyway. Before we walked out, she looked at the doctor. 18 months ago, I trusted you with my life. Dr. Monroe lowered her voice. You still should. Then tell me whose heart I have. The doctor's eyes shifted toward the corridor camera. I cannot answer it here. Where can you answer it? Dr. Monroe stepped closer. Nowhere that is safe. She walked away. Detective Quinn had told us not to contact Aaron's family, but inside the plastic folder he had dropped in our kitchen was an old address written on the back of the twins' photograph. It belonged to their mother. Lenora Vale lived 90 miles away, in a small white house surrounded by bare apple trees. She opened the door before we reached the porch. She was 67 and thin, with silver hair pulled loosely behind her head. When she saw Rachel, her gaze moved immediately to Rachel's chest. "You're the recipient," she said. It was not a question. Lenora allowed us inside. Photographs of Aaron and Julian covered the living room walls. Some showed the twins as children in matching sweaters. Others showed them as teenagers, deliberately wearing different hairstyles so teachers could distinguish them. Lenora lifted one framed photograph. Aaron broke his left collarbone when he was 13. It healed badly. The bone still rises slightly beneath the skin. Aaron had worn a torn shirt beneath his coat when he arrived at our house. I remembered the uneven shape near his left shoulder. Julian didn't have that injury, Lenora said, but Julian burned his right palm on a camping stove. The scar looked like a crescent. She had asked to see the dead man's hand before the funeral. The hospital refused. They told her the body had been prepared for organ donation and viewing it would be traumatic. Celeste completed the official identification instead. "Did you believe Aaron was dead?" Rachel asked. "I believed one of my sons was dead. I didn't know which one." Lenora opened a cabinet and removed a box containing every letter she had written to Julian after the crash. All had been returned unopened. She had searched hospitals, shelters, and rehabilitation facilities. Someone from a private legal office eventually contacted her and warned her that continuing to search could violate a medical privacy order. "I thought Julian was alive somewhere and didn't want to see me," she said. "That was easier than believing I had lost them both." I showed her the recent photograph of Aaron from the neurological facility. Her hand covered her mouth. "That's Aaron." "You're certain?" A mother can confuse identical faces. She cannot confuse the way her children look at her. Tears filled her eyes. Aaron always tilted his head when he was frightened. Julian clenched his jaw. "That man is Aaron." Lenora agreed to provide a DNA sample, but she also showed us something Detective Quinn had not mentioned. 2 weeks before Aaron came to our house, Lenora received a package without a return address. Inside was a keycard bearing the number 417. There was also a handwritten message. "Ask Rachel Cole what happened to the heart." Rachel read the message twice. "Who sent this?" "I hoped you could tell me." The keycard matched the metal key Aaron wore around his neck. Someone had deliberately directed both sides of the mystery toward locker 417. We contacted Detective Quinn. This time she did not tell us to wait. She arrived with 2 officers and drove us to the oldest section of St. Catherine's. The former maternity wing had closed 12 years earlier. Most of the windows were covered with plywood. The hospital claimed the building contained only obsolete equipment and archived administrative files. The number on Aaron's key opened a service entrance beneath the east stairwell. Lenora's card activated an elevator that did not appear on the modern plans. The elevator descended 1 floor.
When the doors opened, we entered a narrow corridor filled with metal storage cages. Locker 417 stood at the end. The combination lock had already been removed. Someone had reached it before us. Inside, most of the shelves were empty, but one small recorder remained taped beneath the bottom panel. Detective Quinn put on gloves and pressed play. Static filled the corridor. Then a man began speaking. "My name is Aaron Vale. If this recording has been found, the hospital knows I copied the allocation files." Lenora closed her eyes when she heard her son's voice. Julian described a secret transplant priority program operating through St. Catherine's. Wealthy patients donated money to a private foundation. Shortly after, their medical scores changed. Some were moved ahead of patients who were sicker or had waited longer. Rachel was first in line for the heart that became available on October 14, but someone paid to move another patient ahead of her, a businessman named Harrison Dane. "The heart was supposed to go to Dane," Julian said on the recording. "Lydia restored the original ranking before the surgical team arrived. That is why Rachel Cole received it." Rachel began crying. Lydia's statement finally made sense. The heart had never been intended for Rachel by the people controlling the fraudulent list, but legally and medically it had always belonged to her. Julian continued, "I gave Lydia proof that Dr. Evelyn Monroe approved the altered scores. Aaron helped design the hospital's identity verification software. I don't know whether he understood how they were using it." The recording paused. When Julian spoke again, his voice had changed. It was quieter. "Celeste knows I'm investigating. She told Aaron I'm trying to destroy their marriage. If something happens to me, do not assume the person identified at the hospital is who they say they are." Footsteps sounded somewhere above us. Detective Quinn stopped the recording. One officer moved toward the elevator. The doors opened before he reached them. Lydia Shaw stood inside. Her clothes were dirty, and a white bandage covered one hand. She looked exhausted, but she was alive. "Close the archive," Lydia said. "Monroe knows you're here." Detective Quinn pulled Lydia into the corridor and ordered the officers to secure the entrance. "Where have you been?" "Hiding from the man who cut the power at the Coles house." "Who was he?" "I couldn't see his face." "Why did you accuse Aaron of killing Julian?" "Because that's what Julian believed when he made the first recording." "The first?" Lydia looked toward the device in Quinn's hand. There were 3 recordings in that locker. Only one remained. Someone had taken the other 2. Lydia opened her coat and removed a small flash drive. "I kept a copy of the final recording." Detective Quinn connected it to her tablet. Julian appeared on the screen. He was sitting in his car. Rain moved across the windshield behind him. A shadow moved outside Julian's car. He turned toward the driver's window. The video shook. Then another face appeared briefly in the rain. Rachel grabbed my arm. It was Dr. Evelyn Monroe. Julian looked back at the camera. "She isn't working alone," he whispered. The video ended. Before anyone could speak, an alarm began ringing throughout the archive. Red lights flashed above the storage cages. A mechanical voice announced that the building had been compromised and all electronic doors were locking automatically. Detective Quinn tried the elevator. It no longer responded. Then smoke began flowing beneath the door at the opposite end of the corridor. Lydia stared at the empty shelves inside locker 417. "This isn't about hiding the transplant fraud anymore," she said. "Then what is it about?" I asked. She looked at Rachel. "Your wife's heart contains the only proof that Aaron Vale was murdered."
Smoke continued pouring beneath the archive door. Detective Quinn ordered everyone away from it. One officer pulled the fire alarm, but the mechanical voice kept repeating the same warning. All electronic doors were locking automatically. Lydia pointed toward a narrow maintenance panel behind locker 417. The maternity wing was connected to the main hospital by a service tunnel. It should lead to the old laundry building. "Should?" I asked. "I haven't used it in 9 years." The officer forced the panel open. Behind it was a dark passage barely wide enough for one person at a time. Detective Quinn sent Lenora first. Rachel followed her. I stayed directly behind Rachel while Lydia and the officers came last. The smoke had not reached the passage, but the air was cold and stale. Our footsteps echoed through the darkness. After nearly 200 feet, the tunnel ended at a rusted metal ladder. The officer climbed first and forced open a hatch above us. We emerged behind an abandoned laundry facility across the hospital grounds. Fire engines were already approaching the old maternity wing. Detective Quinn called for medical assistance and ordered an investigator to examine the archive. Rachel sat on the ground, breathing hard. I knelt beside her. "Talk to me." "I'm all right." "You don't look all right." "I'm frightened. That doesn't mean my heart is failing." Lydia crouched several feet away. Her face was streaked with dust. Rachel looked at Lydia. "You said my heart contains proof that Julian was murdered. I should have explained it differently." "Then explain it now." Lydia glanced toward Detective Quinn. "After a transplant, doctors take tiny samples of heart tissue to check for rejection. Rachel had several biopsies during her first year." I remembered every one. A catheter had been guided through a vein into Rachel's heart. Small tissue samples had been collected and examined for signs that her immune system was attacking the donor organ. "The samples contained the donor's DNA," Lydia continued, "not Rachel's." Rachel touched her chest. "So you can prove whether the heart came from Aaron or Julian?" "Identical twins have almost the same nuclear DNA. A standard test may not separate them, but Julian had a rare mitochondrial variation caused by heteroplasmy. It was documented during childhood testing after a heart rhythm evaluation. Aaron didn't have it. The distinction was small, but modern sequencing could detect it. One of Rachel's early biopsy samples had been independently analyzed before the hospital changed the donor's identity." Lydia copied the result. It matched Julian's childhood medical record. "The heart inside Rachel came from Julian," she said. "That proves the identity swap," Detective Quinn said. "It does not prove murder." "No, but Julian's procurement blood sample contained midazolam. I knew the name from Rachel's hospital procedures. It was a sedative." Lydia explained that small amounts of midazolam were normal after a patient entered intensive care, but the concentration in Julian's first sample was too high. More importantly, the sample had been drawn immediately after he arrived at the emergency department, before hospital staff officially administered the medication. "Someone sedated Julian before the crash," Lydia said. Rachel looked toward the burning archive building in the distance. "And the proof was in locker 417? The toxicology report and the crash photographs were on one of the missing drives." Detective Quinn stepped closer. "Why didn't you give this information to police 18 months ago?" Lydia stared at the ground. "Because I helped falsify the donor file." No one spoke. She admitted that Julian had contacted her 6 months before the collision. At first, she believed his accusations about the transplant list were exaggerated. Then she compared the official ranking reports with the changes approved by Dr. Monroe. Patients connected to the hospital's private foundation repeatedly moved ahead of people with higher medical priority. Lydia began copying records for Julian. On the night of the crash, she was working when the twins arrived. One brother was unconscious but alive. The other had suffered irreversible brain damage. Their wallets had been thrown from the vehicle and placed with the wrong patients. Aaron became Julian. Julian became Aaron. Lydia discovered the error after viewing an old medical scan showing Aaron's badly healed collarbone. She attempted to correct the records. Dr. Monroe stopped her. She said changing the identities would expose the investigation. Julian was already registered as Aaron. The organ matching process had begun. "Why not stop the transplant?" Rachel asked. "Because 4 critically ill patients were waiting. Correcting the name would not have changed whether Julian could donate, but it would have delayed the surgeries." "And Rachel?" Lydia's voice shook. "Harrison Dane had paid the foundation nearly $2 million. Monroe altered his status to place him above you. Julian's heart was going to him. But it came to me. I restored the original ranking before the final match was confirmed. Lydia risked exposing the scheme to ensure the heart went to the patient who had legitimately been first. That patient was Rachel. But when Dr. Monroe discovered what she had done, she threatened to accuse Lydia of causing the identity error. Lydia remained silent. She signed the falsified donor documents. She also wrote the letter pretending to be Aaron's sister. "Why?" Rachel asked. "Because you kept asking about the donor's family. I was afraid you would search for them and uncover everything. You let me believe those words came from a grieving sister. I know. There was no sister. No. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. I read that letter every night during the first month of my recovery. Lydia lowered her head. I am sorry. Rachel stood. Her voice remained controlled, but I could hear the anger underneath it. You saved my place on the waiting list. I will always be grateful for that. But you don't get to decide that one good thing erases every lie that followed. Lydia did not defend herself. Detective Quinn received a call from the station. The DNA test from Lenora had been expedited. It confirmed that the man in custody was her biological son. Investigators also examined his healed collarbone injury and compared it with Aaron's childhood medical records. The man who came to our door was Aaron Vale. He was released that afternoon. Lenora waited outside the station. When Aaron walked through the doors, she did not move first. Neither did he. 18 months had passed since each had believed the other was gone. Aaron tilted his head slightly, exactly as Lenora described. Then she crossed the pavement and wrapped her arms around him. He buried his face against her shoulder. Rachel and I watched from the car. Aaron had regained his legal identity, but the truth had taken almost everything else from him. His brother was dead. His wife had betrayed him. His home had been sold. The insurance company considered him part of a possible fraud. Even his bank accounts had been closed after his death was registered. Detective Quinn arranged temporary protection for Aaron and Lenora. She also obtained warrants for Dr. Monroe's office, Lydia's apartment, and the private foundation's records.
Dr. Monroe had already disappeared. Her hospital badge was found in the parking garage. Her phone had been abandoned beside a highway 20 miles away. The fire investigators made another discovery. The smoke in the archive had not come from an accidental electrical fire. A remotely activated device had ignited several boxes of old records. Whoever started it had intended to destroy evidence and trap us below the building. Security footage showed a maintenance van leaving the hospital 6 minutes before the alarm. The vehicle belonged to Grant Kessler. Kessler was St. Catherine's director of security. He had also been the first hospital employee to reach the twins' damaged car 18 months earlier. The police searched his home. It was empty. In his garage, they found automotive paint matching a scrape on the rear of Julian's vehicle. The original crash report described that damage as impact from the bridge railing. It had actually come from another vehicle. Kessler had followed the twins. He had struck their car from behind and forced it off the road. The collision itself had not been an accident, but the sedative in Julian's body raised another question. Who had drugged him before Kessler attacked? The answer arrived through Julian's missing second recording. An anonymous email containing the file was sent to Detective Quinn the following morning. The video showed Julian sitting inside a restaurant. Across the table was Celeste Vale, Aaron's wife. Celeste wore a dark blue dress and kept glancing toward the entrance. "You need to stop," she told Julian. "Does Aaron know what you're doing? He knows enough. Enough to help Monroe alter patient records?" Celeste leaned closer. "My husband designed security software. He sold the hospital a system. That doesn't make him responsible for how they used it. Then why did you accept money from the foundation?" Celeste did not answer. Julian placed several bank statements on the table. They showed payments from the private foundation to a consulting company registered in Celeste's name. She had been paid to identify weaknesses in Aaron's software. Instead, she gave Dr. Monroe a way to change transplant rankings without triggering an audit. Julian threatened to take the evidence to federal investigators. Celeste begged him to wait 24 hours. "I can get Aaron away from them," she said. "You're protecting yourself, not him. You don't understand what Monroe will do." The recording ended there. The date was October 13, 1 day before the crash. Aaron watched the video beside us in Detective Quinn's office. His expression remained blank until Celeste mentioned getting him away. Then he shook his head. "She never warned me." "Did you know she worked for the foundation?" Quinn asked. She told me she had a hospital consulting contract. I didn't know what she was doing. Did you meet Julian on October 14? Yes, he called and asked me to drive him to meet Lydia. Aaron remembered stopping at a roadside restaurant. Julian went inside alone. When he returned, he carried 2 cups of coffee. The brothers switched seats because Julian said he was too tired to continue driving. Aaron drove. That detail contradicted Celeste's police statement. She had claimed Julian was driving, and Aaron threatened him in an argument. "Which one of you drank the coffee?" Quinn asked. Julian. The sedative had been in his cup. Celeste had drugged Julian during their restaurant meeting. She did not intend for Julian to die in the collision. She intended to make him confused and prevent him from meeting Lydia. But she had also informed Dr. Monroe where the brothers would be traveling. Monroe sent Kessler to recover Julian's evidence. Kessler forced their vehicle off the bridge. After the crash, he removed Julian's bag before calling emergency services. At the hospital, Monroe discovered that the twins had been registered under the wrong names. Instead of correcting the mistake, she used it. Aaron could be hidden under Julian's identity. Julian could be declared dead as Aaron. Celeste would receive the insurance money and remain silent. The hospital would keep its transplant fraud concealed. It was not a perfect plan. It became possible only because the crash had given them an unexpected opportunity. Detective Quinn issued warrants for Celeste, Monroe, and Kessler, but none of them could be found. That evening, Rachel and I returned home under police protection. An officer inspected every room before allowing us inside. Nothing appeared disturbed. Then, Rachel opened the refrigerator to take her evening medication. She removed one of the anti-rejection capsules from its container. The capsule separated between her fingers. White powder spilled onto the counter. Rachel stared at it. "These aren't my pills." We checked the remaining medication. Every capsule had been opened and refilled. The labels were genuine, the seals appeared intact, but the medication inside had been replaced. The man who entered Rachel's hospital room had not been trying to steal her blood sample. He had taken her bag for less than 30 seconds, long enough to exchange her medicine. We called her transplant team. A physician unaffiliated with Dr. Monroe examined Rachel and ordered emergency blood tests. Her anti-rejection medication level was dangerously low. Someone had replaced the medicine several days ago, possibly during a routine pharmacy delivery. Rachel's immune system had already begun reacting against Julian's heart. She was admitted to a different hospital. Treatment started immediately. Doctors believed they had caught the problem early, but for the first time since the transplant, Rachel's heart function began to decline. I sat beside her through the night. At 3:18 in the morning, my phone received a video call from an unknown number. A woman appeared on the screen, Celeste Vale. She was sitting inside a dark vehicle. "I never wanted Rachel to be hurt," she said. "You changed her medication?" "No, Monroe did." "Where is she?" "I don't know, but I know what she wants." Behind Celeste, I saw a metal wall and several stacked medical containers. "She wants Julian's original biopsy samples. If she destroys them, the donor identity cannot be independently verified. The police have Lydia's copy. A copy can be challenged. The original tissue cannot." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Monroe is going to kill everyone who can connect her to the transplant program." The vehicle around Celeste suddenly moved. She looked towards something outside the camera. Fear entered her face. Then she held a key card close to the screen. A number was printed on it, B12. The samples were moved to the Foundation's private laboratory, cold storage room B12. "Tell me where you are." Before Celeste could answer, the vehicle's rear doors opened. Bright light flooded the screen. A man's voice said her name. Celeste dropped the phone. For 1 second, the camera showed the person standing outside. It was Grant Kessler. He reached toward the phone. Then the call ended. I alerted Detective Quinn. She traced the signal to a medical storage facility 30 miles north of the city. Police units were sent immediately. Rachel grabbed my wrist. "You have to go." I'm not leaving you. If Monroe destroys those samples, Julian will remain Aaron in every official record. His mother will never get the truth recognized. You could lose the heart. That is exactly why you have to protect the proof of whose heart it is. A nurse entered with Rachel's latest test results. Her body was showing early signs of acute rejection. Doctors were preparing stronger treatment. I sat beside her through the night. Detective Quinn was waiting downstairs. Aaron sat in the passenger seat of her unmarked car. He held Julian's photograph in one hand and the metal key to locker 417 in the other. As I climbed into the back seat, Quinn received an emergency radio report. Officers had reached the private laboratory. The front entrance was open. The building appeared empty, but every cold storage unit was remotely programmed to shut down at sunrise. We had 43 minutes before Julian's final biological evidence was destroyed. Then Aaron's phone rang. The caller identification displayed his own number, the number that had been disconnected after his legal death. He answered. Dr. Monroe's voice filled the car. "If you enter that laboratory," she said, "Rachel Cole will not survive the morning."
Dr. Monroe's threat remained on the phone for several seconds. "If you enter that laboratory, Rachel Cole will not survive the morning." Detective Quinn signaled to Aaron to keep her talking. I leaned toward the phone. "Rachel is at another hospital. You cannot reach her." Monroe laughed softly. "You still believe hospitals are separate institutions. They share laboratories, pharmacies, electronic records, and temporary staff. Rachel's treatment orders were entered 40 minutes ago." My stomach tightened. "What did you do?" "Turn the car around." Detective Quinn silently contacted Rachel's hospital through her radio. She requested immediate police protection, suspension of every electronic order connected to Rachel, and direct verification by her attending physician. Monroe heard the transmission. "You cannot protect her from every person wearing a hospital badge." "No," said Quinn, "but now everyone in that hospital knows you threatened her. If anything happens, the call traces directly back to you." The line went silent. Then Monroe spoke to Aaron. "Your brother destroyed your life. He could have walked away, but he wanted to be a hero." Aaron's hand tightened around Julian's photograph. "He wanted sick people to receive the organs they were promised. You think the system was fair before us? Money has always decided who receives the best care. We simply stopped pretending otherwise. You forced our car off a bridge. That was Kessler's mistake. You changed our identities. That kept you alive. You left me unconscious under my dead brother's name. I paid for your care." Aaron's expression changed. For 11 months, an anonymous private trust had funded the neurological facility. Monroe had not protected him out of compassion. She had kept him hidden because a living Aaron would expose the false death certificate and the insurance payment. "You expected me never to wake up," he said. "I expected the damage to be permanent." Detective Quinn had heard enough. "Dr. Monroe, federal and state investigators are entering the laboratory now. Come outside with your hands visible." Monroe disconnected. Quinn accelerated toward the storage facility. Police vehicles surrounded the building when we arrived. The front offices had been cleared. No one had found Monroe, Kessler, or Celeste. The building's cold storage system was still counting down toward shutdown. 31 minutes remained. Aaron examined a diagram on the emergency control tablet. He recognized the security architecture immediately. "This is based on my software." "Can you stop the shutdown?" asked Quinn. "Not from outside. Someone activated a physical isolation mode. The reset has to be performed in the server room. You're staying here. You don't have anyone else who understands the system." Quinn looked at the countdown. Then she gave Aaron a protective vest and assigned 2 officers to remain beside him. I was ordered to stay outside. For once, I did not argue. Rachel needed me alive. Aaron, Quinn, and the officers entered through the eastern loading area. For the next 9 minutes, I could only listen to fragments over the police radio. The first floor was clear. The elevators had been disabled. A stairwell door had been chained from the inside. Officers forced it open and reached the lower storage level. Then the radio signal broke apart. At Rachel's hospital, security officers removed a temporary nurse who had tried to enter her room using a stolen identification badge. The label was false. Police took her into custody before she reached Rachel.
Monroe had not been bluffing. I called Rachel. Her voice was weak but steady. "They stopped her," I said. "You're safe." "Did they find the samples?" "Not yet." "Ethan, if you have to choose." "There is no choice. You come first." "Julian deserves his name. And you deserve to survive. We are going to protect both." A burst of radio traffic interrupted us. Officers had located Celeste. She was locked inside a supply room on the lower level. Her wrists had been secured with plastic restraints, but she appeared physically unharmed. She told police that Kessler had brought her there to help locate Julian's samples. When she refused, he locked her inside. Monroe and Kessler were still in the facility. 22 minutes remained before the cold storage units shut down. Aaron reached the server room. The door required both a key card and a 6-digit authorization code. Celeste's B12 card opened the first lock. Aaron entered a code based on the date he originally installed the hospital's identity system. The door opened. Inside, several control units had been physically disconnected from the network. Aaron could stop the shutdown, but only if someone restored power from the cold storage room at the same time. Detective Quinn and one officer moved toward B12. Aaron remained in the server room with the second officer. When Quinn entered the storage corridor, she found Kessler beside the main electrical panel. He was holding a container of liquid coolant and preparing to pour it across the controls. Quinn ordered him to step away. Kessler turned as though he intended to surrender. Then he struck the emergency release switch. A heavy insulated door dropped between Quinn and the officer behind her. The officer could see through the reinforced window but could not reach her. Kessler moved toward Quinn. She drew her weapon and repeated the order. He stopped. For several seconds, neither moved. Then another voice came from the end of the corridor. "Grant, it's over." Dr. Monroe stepped forward. Kessler looked at her. "You said the exits were clear." "They were." "You brought them here." "No, Celeste did." Quinn kept her weapon trained on them. "Both of you, put your hands where I can see them." Monroe raised her hands. Kessler did not. "Tell her what happens if the samples survive," he said. Monroe's face was strangely calm. "The samples prove Julian was the donor. The procurement blood confirms he was sedated before the crash. Combined with your vehicle damage and the allocation records, they establish the conspiracy. You said you destroyed the toxicology report. I destroyed the electronic report. Lydia preserved the original sample." Kessler looked toward cold storage room B12. He finally understood that Monroe had lost control of the evidence. He rushed toward the electrical panel. Quinn intercepted him before he reached it. The struggle lasted only a few seconds. The officer behind the door activated a manual release, entered the corridor, and restrained Kessler. Monroe remained against the wall with her hands raised. Her confession had been captured by Quinn's body camera. 17 minutes remained. The door to B12 opened with Celeste's keycard. Inside were hundreds of numbered containers preserved at very low temperatures. Most held routine pathology samples. Julian's samples had been hidden under Aaron's donor number. Aaron used the original compatibility code from Rachel's transplant report to locate them. SCV-417.
There were 6 containers. 3 held early biopsy tissue taken from Rachel's transplanted heart. 2 contained procurement blood from the donor. The final container held tissue collected before the transplant. Every sample was sealed. Every label contained the same false name, Aaron Vale. Quinn restored power from the storage room. Aaron reset the server. The countdown stopped with 11 minutes remaining. The original evidence survived. Dr. Monroe and Grant Kessler were arrested before sunrise. Celeste was taken into custody after giving a full statement. She admitted drugging Julian's coffee. She insisted she had only wanted to delay his meeting with Lydia, but she had knowingly given his location to Monroe. She had also falsely identified Julian's body as Aaron, collected the insurance payment, and helped conceal Aaron in the private neurological facility. Her fear did not excuse what she had done. Neither did her decision to cooperate at the end. At Rachel's hospital, doctors treated the rejection aggressively. The first 48 hours were the most frightening of my life. I watched the monitor beside her bed and remembered the night of her transplant. Once again, her future depended on numbers, medications, and strangers moving quickly through hospital corridors.
Aaron and Lenora waited with me. They did not leave. On the second morning, Rachel's heart function stabilized. On the fourth, it began improving. A biopsy taken by an independent medical team showed that the treatment was working. 2 weeks later, Rachel walked out of the hospital. She was weak. She needed months of careful monitoring, but Julian's heart was still beating. Independent laboratories examined the preserved samples from B12. The mitochondrial variation matched Julian's childhood record. The donor had been Julian Vale. The procurement blood contained the same sedative identified in Lydia's private copy of the toxicology report. Investigators recovered Kessler's maintenance van. Paint from the van matched the damage on the twins' car. Its navigation system placed it on the bridge at the exact time of the collision. The Hospital Foundation's financial records revealed payments from wealthy transplant candidates, including Harrison Dane. Dane had believed he was making charitable donations, but prosecutors found evidence that his representatives had been promised faster access to a donor organ. Several hospital administrators were charged with bribery, medical record falsification, and attempted harm to Rachel. Kessler faced charges connected to the collision, the archive fire, and the attack on the laboratory evidence. Celeste returned most of the insurance money through the seizure of her accounts and property. She later pleaded guilty to fraud, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. Lydia also faced consequences. She had restored Rachel to her rightful position and preserved evidence that exposed the scheme, but she had falsified official documents, written the fake donor family letter, and remained silent after discovering the brothers' identities had been switched. Her medical license was suspended. She accepted a reduced sentence in exchange for her testimony. Before sentencing, she wrote Rachel a real letter. She did not ask for forgiveness. Rachel appreciated that more than another apology. Aaron's legal resurrection took almost 7 months. A judge canceled his death certificate. His driver's license and financial identity were restored. The neurological facility corrected its records. The life insurance company formally recognized that he had never died. Julian received a new death certificate under his own name. The official cause included injuries from an intentionally caused vehicle collision. Lenora held a second memorial service. This time, the correct son's name appeared above the photograph. Rachel and I attended with Aaron. There was no large crowd. Julian had lived quietly, and many people who knew him had believed he disappeared after the crash. Lydia came, but remained near the back. At the front of the room stood photographs of Julian's life. Julian with a camera around his neck. Julian interviewing workers outside a factory. Julian and Aaron laughing beside the lake. Beside the photographs were 4 candles representing the 4 people who had received his donated organs. Rachel lit the first candle. After the service, Lenora gave Rachel a small audio recorder. Investigators had recovered Julian's third and final message from Celeste's encrypted files. It had not been made for the police. It had been made for whoever received his heart. Julian had recorded it several months before the crash, while renewing his organ donor registration. Rachel pressed play. If you're hearing this, then something probably went very wrong for me, and something went very right for you. Rachel laughed through her tears. I don't know who you are. I don't know whether you're young or old, brave or terrified. I only know that if part of me can give you more time, then I want you to take it. Rachel covered her mouth. You don't owe me a perfect life. You don't owe my family an explanation for every day you survive. Just use the time. Love somebody. Forgive somebody if they deserve it. And if they don't, protect yourself and keep living anyway. The message ended. For months, Rachel had struggled with the lies surrounding her transplant. She felt that her survival had been built on Julian's stolen identity. His recording finally gave her something honest. 1 year after Aaron came to our door, we invited him and Lenora to our home. It was raining again, though not as heavily as the night we met. Aaron stood on the porch holding the same plastic folder. This time, it contained the court order restoring his identity and Julian's corrected death certificate. Rachel opened the door before he could knock. She hugged him. Aaron froze for a moment, then he hugged her back. Later, we sat around the kitchen table. Lenora brought photographs and stories about Julian.
She told Rachel that Julian hated olives, sang badly, and always stopped to help stranded drivers. Aaron admitted that his brother had once pretended to be him during a school exam and received a lower grade. For the first time, Julian became more than a donor, a victim, or a name inside a medical file. He became a person. Rachel returned to teaching part-time. On her first day back, she played piano for her students. I stood outside the auditorium and listened. Her performance was not flawless. Her hands tired before the final verse, but the music continued. Eventually, Aaron began working with a nonprofit that helped families correct medical identity errors. He kept Julian's camera on his desk. Lenora visited us often. She never placed her hand against Rachel's chest or asked to hear Julian's heartbeat. She said she did not need to. She could hear Julian in Rachel's laughter and in every ordinary day his gift had made possible. The man who knocked on our door had not returned from the dead. The truth was more complicated. Aaron had been erased so powerful people could protect their money and their reputations. Julian had been buried beneath his brother's name. Rachel had received the right heart through a system corrupted by the wrong people. In the end, the evidence that exposed them was not hidden inside a secret grave or a locked police vault. It had been beating in our home for 18 months. The hospital declared Aaron Vale dead, but when he knocked on our front door, he did more than reclaim his own life. He gave his brother back his name.